Thanks, Julie.
Good morning and welcome to Geotab and AFP's webinar, Using Rich Data to Gain New Insights. I'm delighted to introduce myself, Julie Summerall. I'm an AFP Director and your host for today. My colleague James Pestle, also an AFP Director, and of course, importantly, our presenters today, Adam Fletcher, who's a partner account manager for Geotab in the UK and Ireland, and Paul Kirby, owner of EV Essentials. Sorry about the hesitation there, Paul. Before I hand over to Adam and Paul, I'd like to advise you that we'll be recording this webinar to allow members and those who hadn't had the opportunity to join us this morning to review the content at a later stage. Just to remind you, our Q&A session will follow the presentations. Okay, over to you, Adam and Paul.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julie. Welcome, everyone. And just as a bit of an introduction, I guess, myself and Paul are going to run through the next few slides and just have a more, blended conversation about how we believe fleet managers could improve how they run their fleets today, some advice, some tips. So please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. Anything to add, Paul?
Well, no. Hello and welcome. This is my second day as owner of EV Essentials, focusing on vans, as you can probably guess from my background. So I'm really excited to kind of talk about how data can help, because it certainly can, as long as it's converted into insight. But we'll discover that today.
Fantastic. Next slide, please, James. So just running through the agenda, a few of the topics we want to touch on are looking at how you can monitor fuel usage, reduce air pollution using AdBlue, reduce idling, of course, linked to the fuel there, maintain compliance standards, and then Paul, the EV and eLCV expert, will take over and go through the transition to electric, operate electric, and obviously the TCO stuff there at the end. So next slide, please, James. So first, we'll start with the fuel usage. So with this, just gone through and looked at over the course of this year so far, every month we've seen a rise in the fuel. So the fuel pump has risen approximately by £5 more per fill-up, and that's having an impact on the fleets. And that's going to continue to rise as we go through the year, and we're seeing that that is predicted to have a double growth as we go through 2021. So really, as we come back to how can we use the data to impact that and reduce the fuel costs within our fleets, one of the ways is implementation of telematics. And through implementing telematics well, you can save as much as 14% on the fuel cost per annum. And through that, you can see just by implementing telematics, general change of behaviour within the way the fleets run. So the drivers themselves are more aware that you're able to see what's being done in the vehicle. You think that the business private mileage is more transparent as a result, so more accuracy in the claims there. And even travelling between jobs, so not diverting in between, going more direct between jobs. And then you can see a direct correlation between driver behaviour. So you looking at the data, looking at how vehicles are being driven, better driving standards reduces the fuel cost within the fleet. Anything you want to add there, Paul?
Go on. Somebody's got to say I'm on mute, right? Who got it? Bingo. I think efficiency is key, isn't it? And for any business operating a fleet of vehicles, a small saving in regard to costs around fuel can actually really mount up. So the ability to be able to focus in on it and improve it through driver behavior, if you're just monitoring it, is definitely great value from my view.
Absolutely, and concur. And I think through the power of the data, as the title suggests, it's getting those insights, understanding where the fuel's been spent, how it's been spent, how you can make the improvements, and it's getting that data to help drive those changes, which is where the fuel saving truly comes from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next slide, please, James.
Just whilst that slide's changing, no, just carry on. The route optimization, thinking about you could go the shortest route, but it costs you more fuel. You go a slightly longer route. It's about kind of the time and money elements of both of those things are really valuable. So the route optimization definitely works to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we move on to the next slide, so reducing air pollution with AdBlue, kind of the topics as we run through these. I'm a big EV advocate at heart, so a Geotab as a business, and I guess as we run through these, there's some changes that you can make. We'll come on to the whole EV topic towards the end. However, there are changes you can make in your fleet today, which drive better air quality, better sustainability as a fleet. And one of the topics, as we've got on the slide in front of us here, is AdBlue. So, by making sure your vehicle's topped up, you can save or reduce the amount of NOx by up to 90%. And actually, quite a good stat there is that, for vehicles that are driving every 5,000 miles, they need to make sure that their AdBlue is topped up and changed. Now, how do you see that if you're running a fleet of vehicles, a fleet of vans, for argument's sake? Unless you're in that vehicle, you're not getting that data back through. So again, coming back to the telematics topic, one of the ways that you're able to monitor that is by getting a true picture of the AdBlue levels in the vehicle. And that can be done in a number of ways. One of the ways that we like to do it is we get the AdBlue level directly from the vehicle, and then we can create a rule that says, can you tell me when that vehicle has less than 20% AdBlue? What enable a fleet manager to do? Well, the vehicles that are returning to the yard, if that's how the business is run, you're able to see, well, we need to top these vehicles up before the next day. It enables less downtime. And actually, the person who's returning from a long day, getting out the vehicle, perhaps not in that vehicle the following day, he or she won't have the responsibility always to remember and remind to say, we'll top up that AdBlue. So it allows fleets to become more efficient. It allows fleets to see that data, to be able to action that data. And it's that insight. And I'll come back to that rule that I said a bit earlier on. We're not telling you the AdBlue levels where you've got to go and look and go into the data. We're actually telling you, hey, just tell us when someone's dropped below 20%. When that vehicle has dropped below 20% AdBlue, that's the alert that I want to know about as a fleet manager, because that will enable me to make the right changes and put the top-ups in my fleet.
Yeah, Adam.
Anything to add there, Paul?
Yeah, no, AdBlue is a really great addition because obviously vans produce NOx quite considerably, and that the driving down of NOx is really important. And this is all about this transition. And what we get from this is that the data being provided really helps with transition, because we're looking at new things for the first time. And AdBlue has not been around a very long time, and certainly when it was introduced in the commercial vehicle world, it did cause some concerns, people putting the wrong fluids in the wrong places, all those kinds of things. So, to anything that can support a change in the way we do things is really good news.
Yeah, absolutely, fully agree there, Paul. Next slide, please, James. So as we move through and link back, I guess, to the fuel topic, we've got reducing idling. So a vehicle idling can cost the business around £720 per annum per vehicle. And actually, coming back to the sustainability topic, if we look at a vehicle that's sat idling, they're producing 20 times more pollution when sat idle than if they were traveling 30 miles an hour. So again, coming back to that whole topic there, where we want to drive cleaner air, a cleaner future. Well, one of those we can do is by implementing or looking at telematics through a solution and reducing the idling within your fleet. And how does that really work? And how can you reduce the idling? There's some topics there on the screen in front of you, but are you able to see as a fleet manager where is the idling happening within my fleet? Is it in the mornings? Is it the cold mornings? Is it the hot weather as we're experiencing today? So are people taking breaks in their van because the air con's on? Those are the kind of things that we can eradicate. And actually, is it around the depot? Do we experience high idling sat at a depot? This is the information that can come through from a telematics solution. And I think crucially here as well, it's how that idling is reported. So the industry standard, I guess, is looking at true idling, because what we want to see there is we don't want to just see 2 clicks of the ignition's on, the engine's not running. What we want to see is actually the engine's running and fuel's being burnt. And that's the data that we want to see coming through. And that's how we can impact on reducing the idling by getting that insight. Anything to add there, Paul?
Sorry, I had a lot of background noise there. I think one of the things for me, Adam, about this particular slide is that you know, the insight that's coming out of the data. You know, I must admit I didn't know 720 quid sounds a lot of money, but you know, I'm guessing you've taken the data and also that other piece around a vehicle producing 20 times more pollution when idle compared to traveling at 30 miles an hour. I mean, these are big numbers. And one of the things I was going to ask you, are you finding that customers are, once they know this information, are putting in incentives for their drivers to change their behavior?
Yeah, so I think when we look at driver behaviour as a whole subject, improvements in driver behaviour allows a fleet manager to produce, let's say, a driver league table. So, you know, having the best performing drivers being rewarded for that impact, and of course, idling forms part of that. So, yeah, idling and fuel all form part of a reduction if you drive the vehicle better. And similarly, I think the maintenance of the vehicle, wear and tear, and compliance. So just being safer out on the streets, on the roads, making sure that you're actually driving that vehicle safely and efficiently will naturally bring down the running costs of a fleet. So yeah, absolutely seeing the correlation between driver behaviour and reduction in costs. Next slide, please, James. So as we come onto this slide, so we're looking at maintaining compliance standards, and this is primarily around HGVs. So we're looking at the slightly larger vehicles in here, and a few of the subjects there. So tachograph, as we know, any vehicle over 3.5 tons has to have a way of recording their driving hours. So this is important for a fleet manager because they need to make sure that their work is scheduled in around the availability of their drivers and what hours they've got to drive in that particular day or week. So having access to that data really helps a fleet manager to plan the work that's coming in. If you're reliant on having to call drivers, ask them to tell you what they've been doing, what breaks they've had, etc., that's really time consuming. And actually, do you want to be disturbing a driver as they're driving that big heavy vehicle down the motorway or down the roads? Absolutely not. So I think from a valuable insight point of view, if you're running a fleet and you've got jobs that are coming in that you need to schedule in for later that day or later on that week, being able to get that tachograph information, the driving hours back in, having the insight, understanding who's available to carry out that work, I think is a real powerful tool. And it's fairly new. I guess the visibility of tacho data has been around for a number of years, but actually the end customer or the end user using that data and seeing it live, that's something that's been around for the last few years in particular, and we're seeing the uptake now as it's becoming more critical. You know, remaining compliant on the road is quite a critical thing for any fleet manager. So, and of course the walk round checks, so the compliance standard there, making sure the vehicle is fit and ready to go about the daily task. That's also critical, and drivers have got that added responsibility to make sure that they're reporting in any damage or any faults or any predictive maintenance. And again, come back to a stat earlier on, Paul, that it's around £300 to £600 per day that a vehicle for unplanned maintenance costs the business. So if you think about if your drivers aren't reporting in or you're not seeing the faults that are on the vehicle, that results in unplanned maintenance, and that's what costs a fleet a significant amount of money. So it's scheduled maintenance can save a fleet of up to 14% per year. Those are the stats that we're seeing through the data we're gathering. And again, it's been able to see that real time. Even go back to the maintenance, the garage themselves. You know, if they know that there's a tyre that's worn or a brake pad or a light that's out, they're able to make sure they've got that in the garage ready to fix, and so the vehicle's ready for the next working day. Or alternatively, make arrangements for that vehicle to pull into a nearest garage that's able to do that maintenance for them. Anything to add there, Paul?
Well, I mean, I'm a great advocate of the walk around checks, and you make a great point there, Adam, about, you know, making sure that the vehicle's ready and fit for purpose for the day, because, you know, the unplanned maintenance is the most costly element, and, you know, I mean, 300 to 600, maybe even higher. So I'm a great advocate of actually putting those walk around checks on all vans, really, all commercial vehicles, anything from, you know, a Peugeot Bipper on the way up. So it doesn't matter to me, but I think, yeah, it's great that that facility is there, and we should use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from our customer base, we are seeing that. So we are seeing the cars, the vans implementing either a daily or a weekly check. So there's a regular cadence within there. Of course, for HGVs, that's something that they to do on a daily basis before they go out and drive that vehicle. But I guess if you think from a personal level, I'm thinking back to my childhood here, but we drove down to Cornwall for a holiday. My dad would always make sure that there's oil topped up, there's water in the car, all the basic checks to make sure that vehicle is able to carry out that journey. And I think if you run in a van or a fleet of vehicles, it's the same, right? You need to make sure that that vehicle is safe, not only for you to drive, but for the other road users.
Absolutely, and
we
when you think you're protecting not only the investment of the business in getting their work done, but you're also protecting other road users, vulnerable road users, by just making sure that your vehicle is, you know, ready for the day's work. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, through our app in particular, you are able to do that walk around check. So rather than on a bit of paper, if you're walking around with your mobile app, you can go through the various checks, whatever they are, that can be determined by actually the company themselves. What do they see as a walk around check? How do they want it to look? And we can bespoke that for them. And actually, a good tool is being able to take a picture. So, you know, I'm not a mechanic, but if I'm reporting into a mechanic, how valuable is it for them to be able to see that's what I'm seeing as the fault, that's the issue I'm seeing on the vehicle, and you're able to share that live back to the office, back inside, and decisions can be made whilst you're still carrying out your daily job. So again, it's taking the responsibility then away from the driver themselves, because the experts in the background can then go and plan that maintenance, can then go and plan that change to happen. So yeah, really useful tool, the Geotab Drive app for that purpose. And we are seeing, as I say, uptake not just in the larger vehicles, but in the cars and vans as well. Next slide, please. Over to you, Paul.
Indeed. Well, so there's a lot of noise about the old transition to electric until you start driving one, and then there's not very much noise at all, which is one of the benefits, but we'll come on to that in a while. So the UK government has pledged to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel, but also they will allow some hybrids, which is kind of good news a little bit, possibly for the van sector. But the bottom line is we have a route to net zero in 2050. And the government has deemed that transport, which has been increasing in terms of CO2s for the last few years, it's time to turn that corner. And obviously we're seeing great progress. But the reality is that over the next 10 years, 9 years, in fact, we are going to be moving closer and closer to all electric. And I don't know, and it'd be interesting to get the view of everybody here, but how many hybrids will be around, particularly in the van world. We've not really seen hybrids other than the Transit Custom. And strictly speaking, it's not actually a hybrid, just saying. It's a range extended vehicle. But you know, this is what we're going to be seeing over the next 9 years, a massive move towards this dead stop at 2030, where everything has to change. So if you decide to defer this whole electric thing, it could end up biting you in somewhere painful. So it's really time to get on that and get started, you know, with finding the low-hanging fruit, and obviously data will really help us with that. And one of the other elements that is really going to drive this transition to electric vehicles is the ultra-low emission zones and the clean air zones that are beginning to be launched around the country. You'll all be familiar with London and the congestion charge and the ultra-low emission zone, and that's expanding out to the north and south circulars. Of course, Bath has launched and Birmingham has launched, and there are others coming to market this year. We know that Oxford will be doing it too soon, and some of these will be zero emission zones. You know, Bristol and Oxford have both stated that they would love to see zero emission zones. And when you're going to have to enter those zones, if you haven't got zero emissions, then there could be, if you just charge in and don't pay the charges, you could end up with a penalty. But it's going to cost you more to run your fleet in around those areas. So it's really important to consider those charges that might come your way if you don't upgrade. And we talked about, yeah, Euro 6. Yes, Euro 6 is possible. But if you're working in and around these urban areas, the air quality is really important. And, you know, it makes a difference to move to electric. So it's absolutely important to consider every element of the cost here for fleets moving in and out of these areas. And these are sometimes things that we haven't thought about before. So it is really definitely time with this transition to electric to now put some electric vehicles on your fleet. You got anything to add, Alan?
Yeah, I think it's, like I say, a good topic. We were speaking to a company a short while ago, actually, and they were talking about the impact that the clean air zones were going to have on their business, because they operate between these major cities. So if you think about a haulier, actually, who's got a real high running cost and small margins, add to that, you've got to pay to enter Birmingham to do a drop, then you go to Bath, then you go to Bristol, then you go to London. That's a significant hike in increase just by paying those charges to enter those areas. So it's something to bear in mind, and something I think, I wouldn't say has caught people off guard, but I think there was hesitation that it would actually go live, it will press ahead, yeah. and was certainly starting to see that. And in terms of the transition to electric, at Geotab, we have what's called the electric vehicle suitability assessment. So for our end customers, what we do is we take their existing telematics data, and we analyze that against the EV data that we've got. So if you're driving a fleet of, if you've got a fleet of 100 vehicles, we're able to analyze the current ICE vehicles that you're running and compare them against the EVs available in the market, both cars and house EVs at the moment. And what's useful about that is that the number of conversations we have, as I'm sure you have had, Paul, is that there's a lot of fleets that are nervous about making that change because they don't know EV. They know all about ICE. They all know about the procurement and the TCO and everything else. But what they don't understand is where they sit with that EV topic. And at Geotab, we've been collecting data now on EVs for over 10 years. And what we're able to do is compare in real world. So if we talk about my car actually is an ICE, I'm afraid to say at the moment. But actually the manufacturer will say I can achieve 48 miles per gallon. Actually, I've never achieved anywhere near that. It's always been, 38 miles per gallon at best if I'm on the motorway. And EV's no different, right? They put that utopia in to say, if you have this vehicle, you can get 200 miles, you can get 300 miles of range. And actually, we're almost at that point of truth with Geotab because we've been collecting the data. We know what the real world range of that vehicle is. So just as an example, if you're running on a daily basis, Monday to Friday, you do a 50-mile round trip every single day, but that one day a week, you have to do 100 miles. The EVSA will compare against actually what's the worst case scenario, what mileage do I have to do as a maximum? And we always work backwards from there. So as a fleet manager, there's some comfort there to say, this is my vehicle or my fleet's here today. These are the vehicles available in my market for the UK in particular. And these are the vehicles that are able to make that transition, so that there's comfort there with again, that insight to tell you, I can make this change. And there's almost that feel that if I can't change one, I won't change any. And that's really niggly subject though, away from me, because I think it's always it's going to be a slow transition. You won't be able to change every vehicle in one go. It's about having that journey and having that piece. And I think with the EVSA, that's a tool that you can regularly use. So, customers of ours will use that every 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months to consistently review. As new EVs come on the market as well and the data is available, we're able to give more guidance as we move through.
Well, it's definitely a transition and not a transformation. We know that, however way you measure it, you cannot turn overnight into an entirely electric fleet. Maybe some small fleets could, but as a nation, we can't. And I think you're absolutely right. Having that support there to be able to give us analysis and real world understanding of which vehicles we can transition to electric. We've got all these reasons. You rightly point out about the charges, and £105 of every week in London. If you are driving the wrong vehicle going into the congestion zone, you can save a significant amount of money that you would otherwise be paying, and you almost get your vehicle for free if that's the case. So I think you're absolutely right, Adam. Thank you. Next slide, please, James. So, just moving to electric doesn't mean that all your problems go away and suddenly you're saving the world. We still need to be efficient, and you've got to keep those costs down. The total cost of ownership is certainly important, and we'll come on to that. But we need to manage that cost, and we need to look at all aspects of the fleet as we're using it. And we know that telematics can give us a lot of answers. We've heard a lot about that already today. And, we need to still look at, how are my EVs performing? How efficient are they? Are my drivers plugging in? Are they getting the energy that they need to then be able to complete all of their work? And also kind of understanding who is going to be needing to charge first, because some people, sorry, guys, are you getting a lot of background noise now? You are a tinsy bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. We'll see how we go, and then if you get a little bit more, then I will have to make a quick dash. I wasn't expecting what's just happened. So, who needs to charge first is really important, because some vehicles will have, nearly a full charge or won't have used anywhere near the charges that they need, and then they can go first in the queue. And I think, there are ways of kind of geofencing vehicles and understanding when people are back on site, so that you can make the very, very best of your fleet, and so that you maintain that efficiency. And understanding what those costs are means that you can then manage them effectively, because you'll have different drivers that some drive efficiently, some don't, and you need to be able to work with those drivers to get the very best of the vehicles. And I'm a great advocate. If you're deploying vehicles, you should really help those drivers make really positive decisions and make the right decisions in order to be able to drive those vehicles effectively and then make that transition. And we also touched on that route planning. That's, we touched on that earlier. Route planning for electric vehicles, it's a different style. Adam, you mentioned that, you drive on the motorway and it's like, you're getting 38 miles to the gallon. Well, with an electric vehicle, it's almost the complete reverse. In and around the town, you get the very best out of those vehicles. And it's on the motorways that you don't get such good efficiency. So it's really important to be able to work out where to be able to operate those vehicles effectively and efficiently, and see if you get good value from them in one environment or the other, and see how to really minimize those costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I alluded to on the previous slide, we are so from a Geotab perspective, helping fleets operate electric then becomes the next step. So as you alluded to earlier on as well, that once you've transition to electric, it isn't, job done and we'll just go and everything will be rosy. It's about then how can we get that data in? So from our EV telematics, what we're seeing is things like we're able to give fleets an idea of their state of charge. Was the vehicle plugged in? When was it plugged in? How much power went in? How much power was used? What's the current state of charge? Has my battery level or within a vehicle dropped below a certain percentage? And it's been able to get that data and insights that enables fleets to be able to then go and operate electric. We've ran pilots in the past for end customers, and we're able to see, that the return of the vehicle. It's no good for me, I don't get the range. And then when we look at the data set behind, the vehicle wasn't charged, or it hasn't been charged, overnight, for example. So you get into the next morning, vehicle's not being charged, you've got less battery range, and you're stuttering to start your next day. So I think you touch on the geofence as well. So one of the end customers that are using the solution effectively, they're able to see when that vehicle returns to that yard, what's the percentage of battery that's left in that vehicle. If it's above or below a certain threshold, they're able to prioritize that vehicle going on to a charge point at that depot, and that's critical as well. There's no good having a vehicle come back that's got 80% charge, plugging in to charge 20% when the 3 vehicles behind are all sub 20%. Actually, it's more critical for those to get on the charging point. So we're seeing fleet managers and depot managers being able to utilize the charging infrastructure that they've got at the depots more effectively. And also we're able to help them operate electric in the sense of, a real clear dashboard that says these green vehicles, these are the ones that are good to go for the next day. These amber, you might want to have a look at those because they may not be able to complete tomorrow's tasks. And these red vehicles here absolutely won't. So we're not just, again, relying on someone physically having to go to the vehicle, check what the battery state of charge is, etc. You're able to have that in a platform. It gives you that insight. And that's how we can help fleets operate electric effectively. Telematics, a dot on the map, being able to track an EV, that's okay, it's got its use, but actually being able to give that rich EV data, that's where the power comes from for operating electric.
And it's so important, Adam, that people can move to operating electric vehicles effectively. Because if they can't and they start losing money, they'll immediately lose faith. I'm a great believer of when we talk about real world range, you talked about it earlier, about having the truth about what these vehicles can achieve. So there's no point in saying a vehicle that can achieve 150 miles to somebody that needs 140, when in reality it can only do 130. It's these true statistics and data and information that gives customers the honest evaluation of how do I go electric, because as we talked about, it's going to happen. How do we make it happen effectively and in a way that people can be advocates? There's a lot of people going into electric vehicles really that are going into it for the financial benefits for them. So from a car perspective, now that, with the van, and it doesn't work that way. There's not going to be that incentive. The drivers will just dump it by the side of the road and think, no, I'm not going to deal with it if it doesn't work effectively for them. And that business will then lose money. So I think it's really, really important that the type of stuff we've got here. So next slide.
Yeah,
oh, sorry. Go on.
I was just going to say a few things on that. I guess that when we're coming back to the operate electric, there's some good stats we've seen from use cases within fleets that are already far in advance on their EV journey. And we think of driver behaviour and how fuel costs that we touched on right at the very start. What we're able to see for particularly last mile delivery is at the start of the day, the vehicle has got a good percentage of battery. They leave the depot, they go and complete their deliveries, their milk rounds or whatever it might be. And actually what we're seeing is they may only use 30% charge during that time, but when they're empty and they're on the way back to the depot, that's when the driver behavior impacts the range. So we've been seeing good stats of around, good stats, bad stats really, of 25% of battery being used just on the journey back to the depot alone, because that's when the drivers are in a rush. They're driving the vehicle differently to how they would do with goods on the back, and actually having that information to hand really impacts how you then go and operate the electric vehicle. We're able to give things like miles per kilowatt, So the analysis there of, MPG, we can do the same, miles per kilowatt, being able to give that rich CV data back to the fleet managers. And again, there's lots of really cool and innovative things that are coming out within the Geotab EV telematic solution. So we're hoping we can help fleets more as we move forward and bring on more partners. So the whole ecosystem within Geotab is about let's partner up, let's work with other experts in other industries to help fleets drive better behaviour. So yeah, that's where I'll finish on that one, Paul.
Yeah, collaboration is absolutely key. It's my word of the year. So next slide, James, please. So total cost of ownership, this is absolutely key to making these steps. A lot of people, as I said, are making decisions based on the benefit in kind and the effective pay rise that they get for taking an electric vehicle. But when it comes to the fleet manager and when it comes to vans in particular, the numbers have got to add up. And you've got to take into account all aspects of operating the vehicles. So the vehicles will be more expensive. Let's be absolutely transparent. There is no question that the upfront costs are more than a petrol or diesel. It's a very rare occasion where one will come in cheaper. And so what you have to then do is evaluate what is the cost of my energy, what is the cost of my maintenance, what is the cost of my downtime, and we talked about that, Adam, earlier, 300, 600, how much is my unplanned maintenance costing me? Because all of these things are reduced. And I mean, the numbers are quite phenomenal. 75% in terms of fuel costs is easily achievable when you're using a business or a home tariff. Maintenance costs are reduced of up to 60%. Certain very large fleets have talked about. And we also know that, from early statistics coming out of insurance companies, 25% less accidents. And so all of these things add up to less downtime. So if you're doing 60% less maintenance, you're having arguably 60% less time off the road. All of these things make a tremendous difference to the actual total cost of the ownership. And when you're thinking about planning maintenance, data really helps. And also knowing when there's an incident, going on. Because I mean, in my history, I've had customers phone up our business and say, "Where's my vehicle?" And it's like, well, okay, go on, tell me. Was this a guessing game? Where is it? And it was we dropped it off at a dealership 3 weeks ago. Okay, well, which dealership was that? Well, it was the XYZ manufacturer. There was one that was consistent, but I won't say them here. The vehicle would disappear, but with the benefit of data and telematics and insight like that, you can know when there's an incident ongoing, and you can minimize that ongoing cost. You can manage your maintenance costs and plan for the future. All of these things all pile into that total cost of ownership. So we can't look at just one cost. We have to look at the full breadth of costs. There are subsidies, and obviously these are always changing. We experienced that change just in the last few months. A reduction in the actual grants that were available on the total list price costs. We will see those come down, I believe, in time, and there are certain manufacturers coming to market with very competitive costing vehicles, but there'll still be more. So we're always going to have to look into, how that can work, how we can make and mitigate all of those costs. Adam, where can we get that kind of information? How will you guys help?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier the electric vehicle suitability assessment, and if I take that as a tool, I'm going to use EVSA from now on because it's a mouthful putting the whole word in. But the EVSA takes part of the tool is looking at, have I got enough range? But then we look at actually what's the total cost of ownership. So we compare what the current ICE vehicle is now, and we can look at the total running costs. So procurement of the vehicle, whether that's purchase or lease over whatever period of time. We can look at fuel costs. So how much am I spending on fuel? We can look at maintenance costs. We can look at, how often do I go in the London congestion zone, for example, how much that costs me. Now we've got the clean air zones to take into consideration, and all these other things that go into the TCO of an ICE vehicle. We can take that data now And through that EVSA, we can compare that to the equivalent EV. So yes, you mentioned the incentives. So what incentives are available for that fleet manager to put in as a consideration? We can compare that. We can then look at the purchase costs, the lease, rental, etc. So when we're doing that whole evaluation piece, we're not just looking at range. We're looking at how can we reduce my carbon footprint, but also how can we analyze against and make the decision, is it cost effective for me right now today to change that vehicle, that van, that car over to the EV equivalent? And you know what, sometimes it just isn't at the moment in time, but at least you've got that information, you're informed, you've got that insight and using the data. And I guess I come back, I think I mentioned earlier on the single point of truth, what we're able to do, we're not selling vehicles, we're not selling cars, we're not an OEM. So we're able to say, hey, this is the information you gave us how you procure your vehicle today. This is what it will cost to run the equivalent EV. And there's the analysis, there's the data. So that enables the fleet manager then to make that decision. And you mentioned the fuel cost. I think invariably the stat that we're seeing is about a third. So if you're spending X amount on diesel or petrol now, the running cost of an EV is about a third of that cost. So you think of the charge there. So again, good rule of thumb, but we're not working off rule of thumbs. We're working off the actual data that we're holding. So really good piece there. So yeah, able to give you full evaluation of the transitional journey.
Which is exactly what we need. We need to be able to act with certainty, don't we? When we're making decisions that will affect the value and efficiency and productivity of our businesses, it's absolutely important to know exactly where we stand, and that's that's a good place to kind of open it out, I guess, to the floor really, because where do people stand? How do you feel around using these kinds of tools to help you transition to electric? Have we got any questions, James? I think that is the final slide, right?
Yes,
that's
correct,
right.
The questions.
Yeah, we've got a number of questions, Paul. I'm happy to kick off with one that refers to commercial vehicles. He's basically saying, do commercial vehicles have the built-in technology to provide AdBlue levels?
Certainly some do. In fact, all of them have the measure. I guess Adam can probably tell us, if there's any particular vehicles that can't give that data out through the canvas. But yeah, all vehicles have that data within them. And obviously they're giving warnings to the drivers. There's usually a countdown from somewhere like 1,500 miles or something like that. And then there's a regular countdown. So any notifications that are in the vehicle, by most sort of telematics kind of functions, particularly if you're doing that reverse engineering, you'll be able to get that data out and probably get a notification. But Adam, to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on reverse engineering there. So one of the hot topics for us is when a new vehicle has come to market or continues to come to market, we've got a team of people that go out and do that reverse engineering. And part of that task is we're not just fitting a black box to a vehicle that's going to track and trace the vehicle. What we want to see is all that rich data that you see. I think if you imagine you're sat in your vehicle now, you've got your dashboard in front of you, you've got all those lights and indications of what's going on. Part of our role is we can go and reverse engineer and make sure that the fleet manager can also see that live in the portal. So think of odometer reading, think of fuel levels, think of AdBlue levels, think of engine faults, all of that rich data that's sat in the vehicle. Our telematic solution, through that reverse engineering process, we're able to get that put into the portal itself. And of course, we don't just collect all that data. It's 40 odd billion data points per day we're collecting across the globe. We then take that data, we do the analysis, and we help give those insights. So on that topic there, when we're out there, some OEMs will tell us a lot more, and we're able to, through that reverse engineering process, we're able to go and find out what else is available. And of course, some tell us less. So again, on those vehicles, there's less information. But in terms of AdBlue, there are some that don't give you those levels, but actually the vast majority we're able to get that information, even if it doesn't show a pretty light on the dashboard. We're able to get that directly from the vehicle, and it's through that process as well that we, the EVs, when I talk about the state of charge, when I talk about how much power is going in, was the battery, the charger connected, etc. That's what we're passionate about. I'm sat here actually in our High Wycombe office, which is the automotive office. So there's a team downstairs at the moment reverse engineering the latest EV that's come to market. And part of their role now is to find out how can we get the state of charge, how can we get the power that's gone in, the charging status, etc. So it's a lot more. We've talked about operating electric. A dot on the map is no good if you're operating electric, because a dot on the map just tells you where your vehicle is. To operate electric efficiently, you need to have that EV telematics data, and that's why that reverse engineering piece is so critical, and it allows us to get the most out of that vehicle.
You know me, Adam, I'm a bit of a data hater. I love the insight that data brings, so I allow data because it's not my favorite thing. But you know, the insight that you're talking about, like, rather than just plugging in a device, doing that reverse engineering really makes a difference.
Yeah. Okay, question number
Absolutely.
2. What's on the horizon that will affect the need for fleet managers to need more data? Adam?
Okay, sorry, can you repeat that? You broke up a little bit there, Julie.
Oh, apologies. What's on the horizon that will affect the need for fleet managers to need more data?
I think we talked over a lot of the topics already. I think, you know, if we think about the transitional journey and the increase in fuel costs, for example, you know, if you just do nothing and ignore those rising costs and you don't look at getting that data in, you're just going to ever increase your running costs. And I think if we look at the operate electric, which we've just spoke about in particular, if you're not getting that data, you're not able to make any changes. You're not able to change the behaviours of your fleet, the drivers, or how you operate. And I think that's crucial. You know, we're seeing it more with EVs because you know, you have to change how you go about your day, how about you go about your deliveries and everything else. And if you've not got visibility of that live, how can you get that knowledge? How can you make those changes? So I think that's how I'd best answer that question.
Okay.
Anything to add there, Paul?
Yeah, a couple of things really. I mean, you know, as I think about it, that we're beginning to see use-based insurance come to market, and certainly data and telematics and things like that can certainly help in that use-based insurance. I know there's a couple of sort of startup insurance companies that are beginning to really bring and use that data that they get from the vehicle to make good decisions around insurance. And also when we think about the clean air zones and the ULEZ zones that are coming up, geofencing of those zones so that fleet managers know when they've strayed into a particular area that perhaps they weren't planning to go into, but they did go into, and it's going to cause a cost. And also the other one that I think is on the horizon is a long way off. Okay, so this is just the sun peeking over the horizon, is autonomy. And that is going to be a scary place, I think, for a lot of people. And, you know, as autonomy begins to come to the market and we're getting more and more autonomous autonomy within vehicles, then I think data and all of that kind of thing will really, you know, perhaps come to life. I think it certainly could be something that is a long way off, but, you know, 3, 4, 5 years time, I think we'll begin to see that. So those were just 3 areas that that sprung to mind.
Yeah, I think on that insurance topic, we have, you know, I think Elon Musk has mentioned bringing out insurance and using that data that's coming in from the vehicle to drive, you know, how they go and set premiums for that end user. And I think that, like you've mentioned, there are small startups that have come to market and larger in the insurance market that are saying, well, actually, if you drive better, that will drive down your costs. So for a fleet manager, I think that's going to become more important because, you know, it's without that data being available for your insurer, for example, how will they have the knowledge that that vehicle or your fleet is being driven correctly or low risk out on the road? So yeah, good point there, Paul.
It tells the story, doesn't it? Because, you know, why do we use data? Why is all this data available? Well, it's to drive improvements and to give benefits. And I think if people buy into it and understand it, then they're going to see, you know, some of the reasons behind this data that we're gathering in order to be able to make a productive benefit, you know, give more value back into a company.
Yeah, it's interesting. Historically, fleet managers have felt that they've got too much data and they don't know where to start. But what are the typical pitfalls with supplying fleet managers with this data, and how can you ensure that they get the best out of it? Adam?
Yeah, so I think on that topic, so historically OEMs have been reluctant to share data. We've completely seen a complete change in how that is. So we've got a relationship with Ford, PSA Group, and some others, and we're actually working closely with the OEMs to help them. You know, how they manufacture, the faults that are coming up on vehicles, the good parts about those vehicles. So it's all that rich data, and I think Paul mentioned collaboration earlier on. Telematics and OEMs used to be complete opposite. You know, there was a reluctance to go down that model, but I think the OEMs and the telematics companies now are starting to work closely together, and I think the relationships between them can help drive you know, better vehicles for the fleet users.
Yeah, absolutely. And but I think one of the pitfalls particularly is to just download data. You know, give them data and tell them, right, there you go. We've given you everything. We've given you a league table. We've told you, you know, all of this data, all these hours that vehicles are idling, or, you know, they've gone in the wrong areas and all of that stuff. And I think what's really needed to help, and I know that this is something that I bang on all about, and I've already mentioned it a couple of times, it's about providing fleet managers tools that they can implement and use quickly and easily within their day-to-day operation, because they've got enough things to do with, you know, the tire that blew, the accident that happened, and the maintenance that didn't go to plan, and the vehicle that's, you know, down for the day or didn't charge overnight or whatever it might be. You know, these are the things that they need to have moved off their table, and we need to be able to put in front of them, right, you know, you can save £720 a year if you focus on this. Let's create a driver incentive scheme and, you know, help these drivers focus in on idling, or, you know, improve safety. Let's try and keep drivers to, you know, tell them there's been loads of rear end accidents and people driving into the rear end. You know, let's get them to step back and, you know, let's offer fleets insight rather than just putting data. Dashboards are good, and I think dashboards will give that insight, but for me it's really important to really bring the insight to life so fleets can manage their fleet rather than just have to manage data.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier, Paul, about predictive maintenance, and within the Geotab, that would come back to the reverse engineering, but we can collect all the engine measurements from the vehicle, and obviously the more information available to us on the newer vehicles, the more information we can pull in. So we're able to give predictive maintenance. When is it likely that part of that vehicle is likely to go wrong? And that allows not only the OEMs to kind of plan their, you know, if you're a new vehicle and you've bought that package where you've got service and maintenance for 3 years, we're able to give them the insights to be able to say, hey, you know, bring your vehicle in, we'll change that part now, and speak generically, but that's a £50 problem, not a £500 problem. And that's the same for fleet managers, you know, able to get that insight to say that if we fix this problem here today, that's going to save me X amount in the future. And it's been able to get that engine management as an insight, sit in the background, but flag it when it's important.
No, you're absolutely right. And having been involved in a product in a large lease co, whereby we took data on a daily basis and really managed where vehicles were and understood when they needed servicing and scheduled all that servicing, we saw typically a 40 to 50% reduction in annual downtime for many fleets. Is significant when you really focus in on one particular area where you're getting insight, certainly around servicing schedules, or even if a vehicle is in a dealership and you didn't know it and weren't expecting it, that kind of insight can really save customers money. So yeah, that's good.
Interesting question here, guys. Commercial fleet drivers seem to have got their heads around the need to have telematics data. but a lot of the presentation is about EVs, which are predominantly cars. How do you deal with the age-old objection from car drivers that they don't want telematics in their vehicle? And is this mindset changing? Is that over to you, perhaps?
Sorry, what's a car? I'm kidding.
No, I think, yeah, so during my time in the telematics industry, there's been a complete change in people's perception of telematics. That whole Big Brother element initially was the standard argument. You don't want people watching you, and no one does. And again, you think about the topics that we've covered today. We're not on about that. Watching that fleet indicatively and trying to beat someone with a stick. What we're trying to do is help fleets manage help fleet managers or businesses help manage their fleets more effectively. And I think those driver scorecards that we mentioned earlier on, incentivizing the drivers of the vehicles. If you do drive a vehicle well, there's an incentive there for you, whether that's monetary or whether that's a prize or recognition, whatever that might be. So I think for the vast majority of drivers out there, it actually helps them. That data helps them. It helps prove or disprove where something's happened. So Paul mentioned, accidents. We've got crash reconstruction as a feature on our solution. So we're able to tell what that vehicle was doing prior to the accident, during and after, and it gives a clear picture. Things like weather, harsh cornering, speeding, and in a lot of cases, if you think fleet drivers are sat in the vehicle on their own, right? So we've heard the cash for cash scenario where there's always multiple people in the vehicle in front. But actually, that telematics data, coupled with things like cameras and all these other partners that you've got within that arena, we're able to give fleets the data that's sat behind that. So yeah, that crash reconstruction. If I'm driving a vehicle and I'm not at fault, having that to back me up is something that I want. I don't want that not in my vehicle.
I think it's important also to not put the way we feel onto other people. So allow people to make a real decision for themselves based on the facts, rather than say, "Oh, you don't really want that, do you?" Or a union says, "Oh, you can't have that." Well, taking the benefits of it, like Adam mentioned, in terms of accidents and safety and looking at safeguarding our employees, it's really, really important. And I suppose you could drop the little bombshell that in every vehicle there is GPS already, and at any given point people can find where they are if they were clever, because of the SOS feature and all of that sort of stuff. So it's there already. I mean,
I think as we move further on into the future, the connected vehicle, people are going to see this data. So I think part of my role, when I first started out in telematics, was helping the fleet manager or the business owners sell the telematics into their business. So, if you're a business owner that's going to use that for, beating your drivers with a stick, well, absolutely, that's going to be the perception they've got of telematics. But if you look at, ways to help them, better management of the job schedule, have you, all touched on route planning, but are you an electrician that's done 10 jobs today because someone picked up the phone and you've answered, versus the other person who hasn't picked up the phone, who's done less jobs but got paid the same amount of money? So there's different ways in which you can use the telematics data, and it's about making sure that you sell the incentives and you sell the use case into the drivers. And I think most cases that just alleviates any negativity around it.
Yeah, an interesting question around hybrids here. What is the EV data telling us about hybrids and car driver habits around charging? Are drivers just getting hybrids for P11D benefits, which we've always thought they were, and not charging their vehicles? And what are fleets doing about this? Is that over to you, Adam?
Yeah, I can take that one. I mean, this is my personal opinion. I've got friends that have done exactly that. They've taken the company vehicle for incentive, for the financial benefit, and actually, they don't own a charger at the home address. So there's never an intention to plug that in, and I'm sure Paul can elaborate here, but then the cost of running that vehicle significantly increases. So yeah, I do see it as a problem. Like I say, friends of mine who hopefully aren't on this call, I know that they've done that we spoke about it. So yeah, data we can see within that as well, coming back to that charging point that I mentioned earlier on, we're able to see, you know, if there's telematics in there and our devices in there, sorry, we're able to see, well, is that driver plugging his or her vehicle in at night to charge? And again, you can get that actionable data to come out the other end.
I think the question between what fleets are doing and what fleets should be doing is probably quite an important one. I think Adam makes a great point about kind of highlighting those people that aren't plugging those vehicles in, because that the reality is when you do the total cost of ownership of a hybrid and using its petrol or diesel engine, then they are much more expensive and much less efficient. And that the same applies for vans. There's a couple of vans that you know, if they're operating their petrol engine, then they're not anywhere like as efficient. So there's no benefit for doing it with a van, but there is a benefit for doing it with a car. And I think, you know, this and I'm personal soapbox here, but I kind of find it difficult that there's so much benefit in kind benefit for people, you know, moving to an electric car. It is significant. I mean, you give somebody a Tesla and a £5 pay rise, you know, I mean, you know, who wouldn't, right? But for your van drivers that are going to have to move, you know, to an electric vehicle and learn a new way of doing things. So it's about that deployment and about getting the mindset right that Adam mentioned earlier, that whole EV mindset, or that, you know, that efficiency mindset. So you are having to do some background work. You are having to create the story, elaborate on the story, the 2030, the clean air zones, the you know, the deaths from poor air quality. All of those sorts of things need to feed into the narrative. So when somebody does something, they're not doing it for just a benefit in kind reason. They're doing it for a holistic reason and for the right reasons. And so then, you know, and then that can follow through into the van world as well.
We'll just limit it to 2 more questions. One that's just come through: will OEMs begin to dominate the driver relationship through in-car infotainment and giving directions to workshops, servicing, etc.? And if so, does this reduce the impact fleet managers can have on their own fleet?
That sounds like a Paul question
well,
to me.
It's one that I have an opinion on. OEMs have been talking about this for years. I mean, I remember sitting in meetings back years and years ago, probably 15 years ago, where, you know, the video was how the driver gets a message: you're going to break down in 30 miles, and, you know, drive to the nearest thing, or there'll be a car rental waiting for you, and all the, you know, this wonderful nirvana. But the reality of the situation today is that you know, the OEM dealer networks are not as strong as they were. Obviously, they're going to be, you know, with electric vehicles and vehicles that are going to be maintained less. Definitely, you know, Tesla have proven the ability to get lots of vehicles on the road and not have a dealer network, or not have a significant dealer network. And obviously, we've got a couple of OEM startups that are, you know, operating similar models, or arguing that they can do it. So it's a difficult one for me. I think OEMs would love to be able to do that because they've got a franchise model to sell. But I think always the fleet manager is going to have the final say so in that fleet. And I think, you know, to rely upon one OEM to deliver a solution is risky at best. And I think that's why third-party solutions that allow you to kind of sit across a number of different ways of maintaining your vehicles, different ways of solving the problems around parts. And I think it's part of the reason that, you know, historically it's been very difficult to get data from the vehicles. The manufacturers have been very protective over that. But there's going to come a point where that who owns the data question will be answered, and it won't be the OEMs. It can't be. It just, you know, and so ultimately the data will be in our hands in order to make good decisions for our fleet on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Okay, last question then. With many EVs having their own closed systems, e.g. Tesla, is it possible for you to integrate telematics into these? And are you able to get valuable insight data around vehicle charging, power consumption? Some of that's been covered, but.
Yeah, sure. I think, so I'll take that one. I think we've touched on, so in answer, getting telematics data from an EV can be tricky. And in terms of how Geotab does it, we've mentioned reverse engineering a few times. We have to go to that vehicle. We have to go and understand how we can abstract that information from the vehicle. Tesla, obviously completely different. We've got a different harness that we use specific for Teslas, for example. And actually, it's through that experience of going, we support just over 165 different makes and models of EVs at the moment, and that's continuously growing, circa 30 on a quarterly basis as more come to the market. And it's through that we understand the different protocols that go on within those manufacturers. So even a vehicle type can have 3 different versions. And until you go and do that reverse engineering, you don't understand what those differences are. And we've been there. That whole process can take, from just touching a vehicle to it being fully supported, can take on average 12 weeks. Those that we go to and it's the same as the previous model and it's got quite a uniform standard, very quick, very simple process to follow. But actually, more challenging ones is when we go and complete it, we sign off, and then we realise that the OEM has brought out multiple versions of that make and model, and then we have to go back out and go and see the other versions. And it's quite a in-depth process, but it's something that we're really passionate about. And as Geotab stand, that reverse engineering piece, this office that I sit in today, they're the guys that go out and make sure that we can get all that information into our platform.
Okay, do you want to add anything there, Paul?
Just the importance, I think, of being able to do that. And it's not my area of expertise for sure, but I know that getting the data out and being able to kind of use it, it's not something that just happens. The manufacturers are very protective. I think it is very frustrating that everything from over-air updates and all of those kinds of things that could potentially affect that the way that the telematics system works. It's very frustrating, and I don't think it's in the spirit of collaboration. And I do encourage and challenge all manufacturers that let's be collaborative and let's look for efficiency within the fleet. And I think that kind of thing will give it.
Okay,
that's all I've got to say about that.
All right, that's brilliant. I think we'll end that session now, the Q&A session. I'd like to say thank you guys, Adam and Paul, for your presentation. I've certainly found it extremely informative and interesting. I'd encourage all of those listening to and watching to contact Adam with any further questions. You've assured us that there's not going to be a sales pitch, haven't you, Adam? So
absolutely, yeah.
Feel free to make contact. And thank you all once again for joining us this morning, and I hope you found it as informative as I did. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Take care.